Hello, authors, book lovers, and storytellers. Welcome to RM Hive, a Reader's Magnet featured author interview. My name is QR, and I'll be your host for today's session. And for today's episode, we'll be talking about the life of Major James Lloyd Coker. We have a very special guest, the author of the book God, Guts, and Gallantry: The Faith, Courage, and Accomplishments of Major James Lloyd Coker. Let us all welcome everyone, Dr. Will Joslin. Hello, Dr. Joslin. How are you?
Hey, QR. I'm doing fine and appreciate the privilege of speaking today with you.
All right. Okay, so let's get this started then. Okay. So, Dr. Joslin, can you tell us more about yourself?
Yes. Well, I'm a Southerner. My dad is from Raleigh, North Carolina, and my mother from Hartsville, South Carolina. And I uh, always wanted to know more about my roots, especially the South Carolina roots. From which my ancestor was Major James Lloyd Coker. He's actually my great grandfather. But as a younger person, I wished I had asked more questions about him because there were still a lot of people alive who actually had talked to him and knew him. He died in 1918, but when I was a younger person in the 60s and 70s, there were a lot of people around who were born before 1918 who actually knew the major. But fortunately, later in life, I was able to get all the information I needed. And what motivated me was uh, I was um, I was a student at UNC Chapel Hill, and I was quite disoriented, trying to find a purpose for my life, trying to even figure out what I was going to major in. And I I went to a guidance counselor and told him I didn't know who I was or what my purpose in life was, or so how was I going to know what to major in? And what he told me was nobody knows who they are or why they exist, and so don't worry about it. And I did not like that answer. Nobody knows who they are or why they exist, and don't worry about it. And I began praying to discover God because I didn't know God, and I came to know God shortly after that prayer through a saving encounter with His Son Jesus Christ. And after I became a Christian, I wanted to live a productive life that really helped people and would shine my light of my faith out, in a productive way that made a difference. And so I began trying to find a good role model for somebody who was doing that. And it was difficult for me to find, at least at my place, that place and time in my life. And the more I studied about my past, from the roots in Hartsville, South Carolina, the more James Lloyd Coker looked like the man that would actually mentor me. And people say, "Well, you mean he mentors you from the grave?" I say, "No, he mentors me from heaven," because I know he's there, and I look forward to hugging him when I get there. But anyway, the man was he was just a man's man. He was very courageous. He overcame incredible obstacles. He fought with the Confederacy in the Civil War. Though he was not a prejudiced man, he actually did more for civil rights after the war than probably anybody in the 1800s, and it's well documented in the book. But he was severely wounded, almost died when he had his left thigh shattered at the Battle of Lookout Mountain near Knoxville, Tennessee. And he was right after his wound, he was captured by the Yankees, and he was in a Yankee prison camp with very unsanitary and somewhat abusive conditions for 8 months. And he was about to die of sepsis and delirium and fever. And um, but he would pray, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" And though a host encamp against me, which literally they were, in spite of this, I shall be confident. And he managed to get one of the officers at the camp to send a telegram to his mother, telling him how severely he was wounded. And she rushed through Yankee cannonball fire and made it through the Appalachian Mountains. And when she found him, he was delirious and on the very door of death. And she nursed him back to health, cleaned his wounds. None of this had been done. He wasn't getting any good food, and she actually saved his life. So it's a great, mother son story as well. And when he finally got back to South Carolina, it was right after you've heard of Sherman's March to the Sea from Georgia up through North Carolina. Anyway, it was a very devastating, intentionally destructive march, which harmed a lot of civilians. Um, and they burned the major farm. He had 1,000 acres with cotton in the ground, which represents a huge investment just to get it in the ground and get it to come up. And they burned all of it, and they took all their animals, all their farm stock, their livestock, their carts, their food, their valuables, put a gun to his wife's head and demanded her heirloom jewelry. And but he rose above all that. And I'm trying to stick to the question you asked was about me. That motivated me to think I can overcome. And if this guy can get a vision for his life and have the courage and the faith to overcome that, which he did, because he went on to found 21 businesses and be on one leg, one usable leg, and become the wealthiest man in South Carolina. And he gave a lot of his money away to found black churches. He underwrote two churches in Hartsville. One of them was an all-black church. He also gave the money for a high school for African Americans, which didn't exist. And he helped everybody, not just himself, because he wanted to pass on, because he had suffered so much and experienced the harshest side of the human condition. He felt a real compassion for the disenfranchised and people who suffered, which, a lot of people never really feel, and he did something about it because he just shone his light and produced so many jobs for African Americans and rural whites after the war, that they actually had gainful employment during a time of devastation when everything they had been burnt, and they lost fathers, sons, and uncles, and they were just on the brink of starvation. So he's my mentor, and I try to pattern my life after him. And this is all to say that when I became a Christian in college, I was looking for a role model, and I eventually found that role model in Major Coker here. Uh,
So, who basically introduced you to Major Coker? Because that's a question, but I want to tell you though, I like the fact that you were looking for a role model, and we don't just disregard that if kids basically or even teenagers are looking for role models, right? If they're lost, that's basically the time that these um, people or kids, teenagers, right? More especially them, that they need someone that they who can guide them, and they need to basically do have an answer. So I wonder who introduced you to Major James Lloyd Coker.
well,
Who introduced you
when I would
to the
visit,
story?
okay, I said my mother was from Hartsville, South
Yes.
Carolina, and so the major was her grandfather, and he's my great grandfather. Uh, and there were portraits of the major hanging prominently in my grandmother's home. And I couldn't help but notice. I remember one time my brother and I was about probably 12 and he was about 9, and we were walking around Hartsville, and it was just incredible. There was the Coker department store here. And then there was Coker College, which is magnificent buildings. It
And
looks like an Ivy League school. And then there was the Coker pedigreed pedigreed seed company, which produced superior seeds, which enabled sharecroppers to double their output per acre and become businessmen in their own right. And then there was the Sunoco Products Company, which was paper packaging. They do plastic packaging now as well, but and he has founded all of those businesses along with about 17 others. And uh, there was just this desire, like, what's the source of all this? I mean, this is
That's
my
when you started asking.
like this is my great grandfather.
Yes.
I want to know about him, but I was too immature to really get to know him because I'm into sports and climbing trees and whatever else. So, uh, but when I got older, I came back to that desire to really know, especially after my conversion, um, when I needed more guidance and to lean into the principles of a godly, visionary, courageous man as a pattern for my own life. Um, but but no, it started back when I was a kid, and then I got married and had three children, and just life was pretty much a blur for a long time. And then
Mhm.
finally, when I was closer to retirement, I had more time, and I was able to really dig in. And I was fortunately privy to a lot of information and some rare family books, which my mother had bequeathed to me. And so I have an amazing amount of information that was written in the 1800s, preserved in Coker College, preserved in family archives that we have, and a lot of uh, articles from newspapers in the 1800s and early 1900s.
So that how that those sources helped you in coming up with the material, in coming up with the book.
Well, yes. I
Hmm.
mean, it's hard to find much information on somebody who lived in the 1800s,
Exactly.
unless there were like a president or something like that, or
Agree.
maybe a senator or something. But part of the reason I wrote this book is this guy. He ought to be on Mount Rushmore next to Jefferson and Washington, because I think he did more good for the country than really any of them because of the way he did it. And a lot of our so-called really good presidents had moral or ethical problems. Jefferson did. John F. Kennedy did. Uh, and there's kind of that seamy underside. In fact, most anybody, if you really peruse their life and study it, you'll find that there's some compromise or some kind of seamy dealings or immorality somewhere, and it kind of gives you a less than enthusiastic, feeling about their legacy. But Major had none of that. Yeah, and that's one reason that I've persevered in this project, because yeah, he's the real deal. I mean, good
Hmm.
to the core, rock solid hero. And he's not just in the Christian sense, though very much that, but in business, in education. He founded two Christian schools, and in social progress, because he provided ways for the freedmen to really get a foothold in life and in their economic advancement.
So if you are going to sum up Major James Lloyd Coker's life, what three words will you use to sum it up?
God, guts, and gallantry.
The title itself, God, Guts, and Gallantry. Okay. Um,
I'd like to
as
tell you more if we have time.
yes,
Well, okay, I told you that he was crippled in the war, right?
yeah. Mm-mm.
Well, after Sherman burned everything, the only thing they had was some cottonseed that Sherman had overlooked, and he went out on a. Can you see that? Whoop,
Mm-hmm.
there it is. You see that? He's out on a crutch and a hoe. Okay, this is right after the war, and he planted 60 acres of cotton on a crutch and with a crutch and a hoe while his side was bleeding, because he never fully recovered from that devastating wound. And uh, I mean, how many young people would do that today? You know, would go out on one usable leg and plant 60 acres of cotton. But he was a real man. I mean, he did what needed to be done. And he was also a very keen businessman and entrepreneur, and he was able to multiply his profits. And um, well, he went on to found, as I mentioned, uh,
I think also, Dr.
these
Jocelyn,
are
with
all his businesses. I'll just name a few.
okay.
JL Company and JL Coker and Company General Store, which had 5 branches across South Carolina. Coker Real Estate, a cotton and naval and trading post, Cotton Mill, Darlington National Bank, Hartsville Railroad, Hartsville Electric and Light Company, Hartsville Oil Mill, Coker Pedigreed Seed Company, Hartsville Cotton Mill, the Bank of Hartsville, the Eastern Carolina Silver Company, the Hartsville Fertilizer Company, the Carolina Fiber Company, which was started as a paper mill but ended up being repurposed as a packaging company. It made all kinds of products to package uh, food. They actually, when you see the pylons driving along the interstate that hold up the bridges, those
Mm-hmm.
concrete cylinders, they make the forms that are made out of very tough cardboard that actually they pour that concrete into. Okay. And they're called sonotubes. They're known, anyone in highway construction, they will know exactly what a sonotube is. But they made all kinds of other tubing from everything from like paper towels to munitions tubes for war. And but anyway, I just want to tell you a little bit more about his businesses, and
But of those
you can imagine how
specific,
many jobs he created.
yes,
Yeah,
I think it's really because he isn't just a businessman, but as you've mentioned, he also is a servant of God.
right.
If you are a servant of God, God will really provide you more to help more people as well,
Yes,
right?
because
And
God
that's why
knew,
he's so blessed.
God entrusted it to him because he knew that he would have the right intent
Exactly.
and want to help people and shine his light for God. So you're exactly right, QR.
Mhm. All right. Dr. Jocelyn, so if I am to read this book, what message do you want me to bring home, with me?
Well, the the messages that come through are a leadership is not just about being a boss and telling people what to do and smoking cigars. You know, leadership is knowing where people are hurting, and
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to create hope for their lives. Um, let's say in business, to train them and give them skills so they have confidence to advance in business, and then to be able to give them the opportunities that enable them to use their skills and succeed. He was able to do that for black and white people, poor people, um, people that had never been to school. He was able to enable them to make enough money to afford that kind of thing, college for African Americans. And he the qualities that he had. Um, I'll just read a few of them. Just this is just in business, okay? Leadership qualities and character qualities. His intent was to have shared prosperity across his region. He had uncorrupted integrity. He gave money back to his community. As I mentioned, he founded churches. He underwrote churches.
Yeah.
Um, he was open to the ideas of others. He had the kind of wisdom that listens to people, listens to God, and isn't just headstrong. Uh, he was very thrifty. Like, for example, when he built the Hartsville Railroad, he was able, instead of getting the expensive brand new railroad ties, he found some that were secondhand but were still in excellent condition. And he saved so much money in his businesses that way. He was very wise as a serpent, but innocent as a dove. And he feared the Lord. He knew he needed the Lord. He was a man of prayer. He was a man who uh, sought counsel when he had to make big decisions and didn't feel like, he was wiser himself than the collective wisdom of other people. And that takes some humility. And he was also a political leader in some ways, though he was asked to be this run for senator of South Carolina, and he would have been
Did he?
easily elected. No, because he wanted to be stay in Hartsville with the people he
Mm.
loved and the church he loved, and had taught Sunday school at for 38 years. And he wanted to make sure that those people were taken care of. And so it just shows you the kind of character he had. Uh, he didn't seek fame. He didn't seek self advancement, but but the Lord blessed him immeasurably, and his influence will go on for eternity. And so, I would say, to try to answer your question, it would be inspiration to call on God and trust Him. That if you do live for Him, and you need to take your own initiatives as well, of course, that He will bless your life and bless it a lot
Mm.
better than you could figure it out on your own without God. And that's exactly what happened to the major.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I was actually while listening to you, I was like, this book is a perfect book for leaders as well, and those who would like to, learn how to run not just a business, not just managing people, but people treating people the right way. If you want to keep them in your
Uh,
company, you don't just give instructions, but you also need to inspire them. That's how will you make your business grow. That's how will you make your people grow.
right. And can I read you one of my reference quotes for the book?
Please go ahead.
Okay. This is from a business, ministry leader in Raleigh, and a ministry I served in was to inner city children, and I was training them to run their own businesses.
Hmm.
Uh, and the leader of that ministry read the book, and she said this: God, Guts, and Gallantry is a beautiful and powerful true story of redemption, of courage, of faith, of overcoming. The book's portrayal of true manhood is profound. The book can inspire every human soul to allow wounds and setbacks to propel us to take hold of the victory we have in Christ and to move past the pride of life to become a reflection of Christ poured out for others. The work is informative in business, in leadership, in history, in social and political sciences, and in ministry. I highly recommend it to Christian colleges and universities and homeschools as a vital work for drawing from the heroes and examples of our past to build leaders of tomorrow. I highly recommend it as a book of applied biblical wisdom to anyone who is in a place of societal influence. And, our young people today, there are those who would tear down our American legacies and our Christian leaders of the past. And there are a lot of them. Major isn't the only one. J.C. Penney was a fine Christian man. John Wanamaker, who founded the Wanamaker department stores in the Northeast. Um, but they need to see that there's a whole nother vista of truth that they aren't being told about, and they're being taught to disrespect America, but they're only being taught one side. And this man doesn't fit stereotype of a Confederate soldier at all.
Oh,
He's a completely different man who transcends all stereotypes, and people need to hear about that because we get a very limited view from our generally, not always, but generally from our media, from education, from our politicians, um, and that needs to change if American youth are going to have any real hope for their own lives and for our country.
I hope, our message gets straight to those who needs to hear this,
Right.
right? Because this guy, Major James Light Coker, definitely does have his own unconventional ways of leading. And definitely, though unconventional, but it's really something that a lot of people, a lot of leaders can follow and imitate. Dr. Will Joslin, 15 minutes is not enough for this conversation. Okay.
I could tell
But
you more about how well he treated his servants in his home. He would, if they were tired, he would tell them to rest, and he would do the work. He would go in the kitchen and do work, or if they hadn't had their breakfast and it was like 10 o'clock, and he would say, "You stop, you go get your breakfast. I'll do it." And and I don't know how he did all that when he's running all these businesses, but
like,
he just cared, and he cared because he had hurt and he had seen the
yes.
bad side of life, and Christ took that and forged that into uh, someone who would comfort other people and would give them the kind of hope that he had when he overcame his agonies, and he wanted to make sure that others didn't have to suffer as much as he did. It's like Paul when he got the thorn in the flesh, that God said, "My grace is sufficient for you." And so he went through a lot of thorns with his wound in his thigh and being imprisoned in the Yankee prison camp. But he came out with grace.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? It reminded me of what my dad told me before. If you want to be a leader, you need to be a servant first.
Right.
Yeah, you need to learn, you need to understand what your people need. And with that, you can definitely grow.
And you build
Okay.
trust and
Yeah,
influence. And when
exactly.
you have trust and influence and the people know you, then leadership is not a problem. They automatically trust you and will want to be on your team.
And that's how you grow a business.
Yep.
Yeah. Dr. Jocelyn, thank you so much for your time today. It has been, wonderful hearing your story and how you were so much inspired with the life of Major James Light Coker. And for those who are currently watching us live, definitely they would love to learn more about this man's story. And you have a lot to share about this man's story as well, where they can follow you and where can they grab a copy of your book.
Well, it's on Amazon. I also have a YouTube video series. If you just search for Dr. Will Joslin YouTube, I have several videos about his life, which I couldn't even share a tenth of it here. Uh, and the book is also being made into a major motion picture.
Oh,
We have
okay.
written a script, and it's very creative. It's a modern story juxtaposed with Major Coker's life, where
Mm-hmm.
college students at Coker College, it didn't have to be Coker College. We haven't actually gotten permission to film it there yet, but it's modern, actually set in 2020, the time of George Floyd's death, and these college. One of them wants to write a master's. Well, he wants to perform actually a master's play about Major Coker, and there's a lot of disagreement between his friends. Some will say, "Yeah, you should do it," and others say, "No, this guy's from the old South, and you're just going to cause conflict." And and so he almost decides not to do it, and then in the process he does a lot of research and he finds out all this stuff that's in my book. uh, and he decides he has to share it because he wouldn't be true to the truths of history and of the legacy of his state, South Carolina, if he doesn't. And anyway, there's a lot of conflict, and it ends up in the end that the people who are against him become Christians, and everybody in the end is harmoniously glad that the movie is made, and they all go to see the movie. And in the
When will be expecting this to be out?
what?
Do you have a tentative date for it already?
No, we actually do have the script, and we are in the process of fundraising to make a
Mhm.
trailer for the movie, and then we can begin to really negotiate with some filmmakers who share our values, and so it's in the early stages,
Okay.
but I am working with an experienced script writer who
Aside
shares.
from the film, are
Yeah.
we expecting other events where the book will be displayed or any other events that you'll be attending in the upcoming months?
Um, I go down to Hartsville uh, with some regularity. I've spoken to um, the Hartsville Museum twice. I've spoken to the Darlington County Historical Commission. Uh, I'm actually going to do that this fall twice. Um, I would say though, if you don't live in this part of the country, that's not real realistic. Best thing to do would just go to the YouTube site, and you could.
It's where I saw your video about James Lyde Coker, where you mentioned about him having 20, erecting 20 businesses. So I was like, oh, really? This man is really is someone.
Oh, well, you know, heretofore he hasn't been hardly even known outside of South Carolina,
But
and
he's a big name in
we
South
need to
Carolina.
open up the principles, the success principles,
Mhm.
and the faith principles of his life to the whole world, because it's really not fair that it just be contained to a provincial
Containing,
area. Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And publishing the book, going live stream through your YouTube channel and being active online is, a perfect way for us to even spread his message, his story, and learn more about his life. Yeah?
Uh, yes,
Okay.
and I enjoyed it
Um,
too.
Dr. Jocelyn, thank you so much for your time. It has been a pleasure. It's over 30 minutes already. We
Okay.
didn't notice.
All right.
Yeah.
Let me go back. I need to answer a little bit more about myself, but I'll do it very quickly, I promise.
Go ahead.
After college, I was in ministry for 20 years. Um, and then I ran my own business for 26 years, which I'm still doing on the side. I'm also still in ministry. I'm an elder in my church. Um, so I've done a lot of things. I've worked in business, so I relate to some of the business principles in the book through experience. Um, so, but then when I got a little less busy later in life, I was able to handle this. But I know our time's up, so
No, I do have one
thank
last
you.
question for you.
Okay.
I do have one last question for you. Golf or basketball?
Oh, at this stage, it's more likely to be golf. Thank you.
Golf. All right.
Yeah,
It's
I
fun
used to,
having you
I
on
used to
set,
could
Dr.
run the
Jocelyn.
hoops. I used to could run the hoops pretty well, but those knees start telling on you after a while. So
Yeah. Okay.
I still like golf a lot. Yeah.
All right. For those who are watching us live, please do follow, like, and subscribe Dr. Will Jocelyn's social. You can go ahead and check him on Amazon as well. And you can also visit his website. It's www.willjocelyn.com. Again, Dr. Will Jocelyn, author of the book God, Guts, and Gallantry. Thank you so much, Dr. Will Jocelyn, for your time.
Thank
As we
you,
say here
QR.
in Reader's Magnet, we share your story with the world.